So, Yoko Ono. If there's anybody, and I'm only talking about this with somebody today, actually, who looks like they were inserted into someone's life to run someone's life, it's
Yoko
Ono.
Yeah. And she's got the background as well, like I mentioned before.
I always thought that it seemed like they inserted Ringo myself as well.
I think he might have been inserted a few times, Chris. That's why I can't sit down on the drum stool.
I wonder if they brought him in as to keep an eye on him, kind of thing.
Do you think that's why they might have sacked Pete Best, who was the drummer before?
It was just the thought I had when I watched a bit of one of their films. I don't know which one it is. You might know, Matt, but they brought him on as like a clown, didn't they? He was a bit of a clown. That's the part they gave him, because I remember watching the film.
Like Funny Spice.
Yeah, and he were acting about and pulling faces, and I thought they clearly brought him in to try to inject some kind of clownery into it.
Yeah.
Or maybe
he was the only one out of all of them that he got on with. Everyone got on with Ringo, whereas John and Paul, they fell out. They were always falling out. George and John fell out. Made up, fell out. Paul. John and George fell out. They were all of them were falling out, but no one ever fell out with Ringo. It's the point I'm trying to make. Everyone got on with Ringo. He was like the glue, if you like, that kept it together. Maybe, maybe.
Yeah, possibly the least talented, least charismatic, if you like. When you watch him, he's the least interesting anyway, I would say. All he does is the V sign.
Well, the most interesting thing is his accent.
Yeah.
I read somewhere, or heard someone say, sorry, it's not mine, that the V sign, i.e. the V or the V sign, is 33.
Okay.
Three knuckles and three knuckles.
Right.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true, but it's a Masonic sign. 33.
Right.
I mean, Ringo, if you're looking for conspiracies and stuff, Ringo certainly was, you could say he was useful to the agenda, because, again, I'm just going off what historians have told us, because we weren't old enough to be there at the time. But when they first went to America as part of that British invasion, Ringo was the most popular one, apparently, of all the band with the fans. He was the one, the most, So again, it's that affable kind of, humorous member of the band, the quote unquote clown, the approachable one. So he had his uses. Yeah, certainly.
So maybe that was the point then. No, he said.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks the least intelligent, the least likely to be some kind of operative, which makes him the ideal candidate.
And also, I don't trust anyone who wears dark glasses all the time.
Yeah. Well, he's got Bono-esque type goggles on.
When was the last time you saw him without them dark glasses?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think there is some theory about his eye colour. There have been two changed, different eye colours, And I don't mean different eye colours as in David Bowie, had one eye.
My wife has.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm talking here about, there's some photographs where you see Ringo with different coloured eyes compared to another photograph.
Got you.
So maybe that's why he's wearing the glasses. I don't know. But
although my wife's might be like a cover up for like a Terminator underneath it, but. Shh! Don't say it. But we were discussing. Reason I mentioned that I was talking to somebody just today. He was discussing Charlie Kirk's wife. Now, whatever we think shenanigans have gone on there with Charlie Kirk, her background is slightly dodgy, because a lot of these people with the Epstein-esque women that were being brought over were being placed with high-profile men, let's say, like Trump. But they were under cover of modelling agencies, which and Charlie Kirk is one of them. She's one of them people that comes from that type of military-esque background, and so they're all from Eastern Europe as well. Funnily, or a lot of them were from Eastern Europe and South America.
Yeah, I'm
not saying Yoko Ono is, but obviously she isn't. But her background's pretty. Again, a lot of these backgrounds they don't actually tell you the most interesting stuff, do they?
Well, I'm surprised they've told us as much as they have, that she came from a family with, royal with royalty in the blood, and also this banking family, the Yasuda Bank, which was, as she said herself, it was her that actually said it, that her grandfather was, like I said before, he was regarded to be the J.P. Morgan of Japan.
Right.
Yeah. So
you wouldn't want to show off about that, really, would you?
Not really. No. But she. So. Yeah. But I do wonder whether she was mind controlled as well, because there does seem to be a couple of, at least one episode in her life where she ended up in an environment where you might say that could have been the case.
Right.
Well, I'm pretty sure in the SRA world, the handlers have also been through the training, shall we say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they'd have to do, really, wouldn't they? They'd have to go through the rituals, probably. Well, we've never been through them, so we don't know.
Well, I think they go through the system so that they can do it to other people.
Yoko did end up in a mental asylum. And there's a bit of a cloud over what actually happened, why she actually ended up there in the first place, and how she actually got out. There's a little bit of a cloud there. I can get into that a little bit and talk about that, because there's a lot of interesting characters that connect to her whilst she was there and directly after it as well. It seems to have happened just after she met John Cage, this alleged CIA stooge. It was directly after she was involved in a project with him that she ended up in the mental asylum in Japan.
And can I just make the link as well, just before you get into that? The reason we've gone heavy on Bertrand Russell is because he seems to be the catalyst, or one of the important catalysts, let's just say, to this whole phenomenon of this peace thing. And he's related to Margaret Asher, who in turn's son set up a gallery stroke bookstore where Yoko Ono was presenting her wares. And all of this is within a very small radius within London.
Well, exactly. The Indica, it started off in 1964 as a bookstore and a gallery in one building. I might be remembering it wrong, but it began in one building in Mason's Yard. Mason's Yard. But after that, it moved and it split off. So the gallery, I think, stayed in Mason's Yard. So the Indica was Barry Miles, John Dunbar, this guy with this father who was in military intelligence, propaganda, and so on, and also Peter Asher. They were the three proprietors of it, with funding from Paul McCartney, Peter Asher's mate. So it split off. I can't remember when it split off, 1966, around that time. And the bookshop moved to a new address, which is opposite the British Museum in London, which is Bloomsbury. And Bloomsbury is this location in London, which is owned by the Duke of Bedford, which is the family line of Bertrand Russell. The Duke of Bedford come from Tavistock, the town of Tavistock, which is in Devon. And the first Tavistock clinic was founded and was set up in Tavistock Square, which of course is named after the Duke of Bedford. And it was the Duke of Bedford actually that donated the first building in Tavistock Square. The Tavistock Clinic, which was there in 1920, was donated by one of Bertrand Russell's relatives. So you've got Bloomsbury in London where all this is going on. So you've got Bertrand Russell also had a flat in Bloomsbury, which was just, about 10-minute walk from where the Indica was.
And not far from the Elliots. And also, just, what I'm going to say, Mason's Yard today, it's called Mason's Yard, but it was actually... I did actually do some research on this when I looked at it myself. The guy it was named after a guy's surname, I believe, not necessarily the Masons. Now, that's what it says. I'm not saying that's true, right?
Yeah.
But currently there is, this is why it gives it away that I'm thinking maybe it's not. There's the White Cube Gallery, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it doesn't matter if it's a Mason it was named after or not. You can pick it and make it. You can walk along and say, "Oh, look, we found whoever their overlords are." Let's just say theoretically, the overlords in charge of the Indica Gallery, where it was going to be back in the 60s before it was there, might say to them, "Well, we found you a location and it's called Mason's Yard." It doesn't it doesn't mean that it has to have been founded by Mason, but just the name itself is enough for it to
exactly.
Yeah. So
what we were saying there, Chris, is Mason's Yard. I can't show you the image at the moment, but on the current land in Mason's Yard is the White Cube Gallery.
Right. Oh.
And I'm just looking at the picture of it here. It is a white box, basically. Now I don't know whether that's in the same. It'd be in the same vicinity. It's only a square in London. Yeah. Anyway, so
there's a lot of Tavistock streets around England and London, though, and Tavistock Square. There's a lot of them around. I mean, I said we worked in Finsbury. Sorry, lived in Finsbury, was it? Yeah. And he lived next to a Tavistock Street. They're all over the shop in London, and Masons as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know what it means.
And Russell.
Apparently, Jimi Hendrix performed in somewhere in Mason's Yard in 1966 as well.
Okay.
What we're trying to get at is, in a bit like Dave McGowan talked about with Laurel Canyon, in this small area, there was a heck of a lot of people who were interrelated and starting off the budding scene in England at that time. And Bertrand Russell, going up to being nearly 100 years old, was more or less at the centre of it all, which seems a bit strange for a teeny bopping craze that was starting.
Listening to an old bloke.
Yeah, I mean, you could say Aldous Huxley the same as well. These old guys who were influencing the peace movement or LSD, like Aldous Huxley was, were all part of the eugenics movement as well.
Exactly. Yeah, and they were, and they wanted a one world government.
Yes, yeah.
And
it says here, even on Wikipedia, the Indica Gallery was a counterculture art gallery at 6 Mason's Yard. During 65 to 67, in the basement of the Indica bookshop, John Dunbar, Peter Asher, and Barry Miles owned the gallery. Paul McCartney supported it and hosted a show of Yoko Ono's work in November 1966, where Yoko Ono met John. Yeah. Now, how did Paul know about Yoko Ono's work? Do you know any information on that?
Yeah, it's a long road that reaches that point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Before you go there, whereabouts is this Mason's Yard file? Just out of interest in London.
It's here we go.
St James's something or
it's Jermyn Street is the north. St James's Square east, King Street and Duke Street. So it's a square in the middle of those.
So no, I mean, is it like Leicester Square area? Because a lot of this
SW1, so City of Westminster. So
right. So a lot of this happened near Carnaby Street as well, doesn't it? Which is Oxford Street.
Yeah, well, it's near Soho.
Yeah,
I'm looking here now, near Covent Garden
James.
And all that area.
Yeah. So Covent Garden, that's Bloomsbury as well.
Yeah.
Right. You're only a stone's throw away from Carnaby Street, where a lot of this stuff happened.
Yeah.
And carried on into punk stuff, didn't it, as well?
Yeah. And Covent Garden, there was the Middle Earth Club, which was one of the underground so-called UK counterculture clubs of the time in 67, 68. It was called the Middle Earth Club. That was in Covent Garden as well.
Right.
Yeah. A lot of other stuff like photographers and stuff like that meeting at these places as well. So it weren't just musicians. It weren't just people like artists and that, but photography. Every kind of art or creativity was being infiltrated. I think Matt will mention the CCF somewhere in this passage of information that we're going to talk about now.
Yeah, and that links into John Cage and all of that. So what happened was, when Yoko came from Japan, she came to study at the Sarah Lawrence School, which, as I mentioned, I think I mentioned it earlier, that Linda McCartney just so happened to have studied at the very same school. I mean, what's the chances of that? In the same decade as well. So I looked on their official website to get a kind of an understanding of what it was about, and it's described as a quote unquote co-educational liberal arts college. So I'm guessing from that it was a kind of a place where if you were a student, you had free reign. Maybe you were allowed to. There wasn't like this teacher-student relationship where the teacher was always right and the student always had to adhere to what the school curriculum or the college curriculum was. It was a bit of a free school, maybe.
Just a slight interlude here. The Sarah Lawrence School or college was quite a prominent college for other famous people as well. Journalist Barbara Walters, as well as Yoko Ono and Linda McCartney. Actress Sigourney Weaver, she's also got a royal bloodline. Filmmaker Brian De Palma. Actress and writer Carrie Fisher. And musician Carly Simon. And that's what you find with a lot of these colleges. They have a group of people that come out of it that make an impact culturally on society. So we'll pick it back up with Matt.
Because before she came here, I might have researched this wrong, but from what I understand, before she came to this Sarah Lawrence school, I think she was a classically trained musician. Actually, I think she knows how to play classical piano. I might be wrong about that, but I think that was her background. And when she went to this school, she was when she was there, she was studying sculpture, poetry, short story writing, various sort of avenues within the arts. And it was her tutor who was there at the time who turned her on to studying avant-garde music composition, or what's known as a tonal or 12-tone tuneless dirge, basically, some might say, or many might say. Yeah. And through this, she began to because this was in the New York area, she began to hang out in the Greenwich Village area. So this was 1950s, early 60s, very early 60s, which, so Greenwich Village at the time was like the heart of Bohemia, so there's lots of beat poetry readings going on and art exhibitions. And she got involved in that world, if you will. She would turn up at events and she got immersed in it, if you like, as a spectator initially. She wasn't involved herself at that point. And that's when it was around this time that she met a musician, a pianist by the name of, here I go, I'm going to annihilate a Japanese name. I've got it written here.
Don't get me saying it.
Go on, say it. Toshi Ishiyanagi. I think. I don't know. Toshi Ishiyanagi. Now, he was a star student. He was one of these pianists who everyone was holding up as, he's going to be the next thing, this boy genius kind of thing. And he started off in classical piano as well, I think. And he got turned on to the avant-garde as well. And how he got turned on to it was through John Cage. He got into the music, if you want to call it that, of John Cage. He began listening to John Cage and he got hooked into it. So John Cage essentially became his hero. And as a result, he enrolled for a course being tutored by John Cage at the New School for Social Research in Manhattan. And I haven't done a lot of research into them, Dom, but I know you've looked into them. There's maybe some question marks about that school.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There is a lot of question marks in the New School. It's popped up in some research. I haven't quite got my notes here. Whether it fits in with this or not, I don't know. But
yeah,
you tend to find a lot of these schools seem to be there nurturing these new movements and that are made to look organic. Yeah. That's what I get. And I'm just looking at this guy now, who was this was Yoko Ono's first husband.
Yeah, he became her first husband. She had three husbands. John was the last one. Toshi was the first one. Yeah, they did get married. Yeah. So they met, and he and that's how Yoko met John Cage, because Toshi was going to this new school and being taught by John Cage, and Yoko Ono used to tag along, and that's how she met John Cage.
Well, John Cage was the man in question, really, wasn't it? What was it? The who was the chap that I was looking at? The German guy.
Brecht.
Brecht, yes.
Brecht.
They were linked together, weren't they? Brecht.
Yeah, Brecht. Is it George Brecht? I can't remember
Brecht.
now. Yeah,
yes,
George Brecht.
Yeah.
He was a founder member of the Fluxus movement.
That's correct.
Which was an avant-garde art movement that Yoko collaborated with.
Yeah.
That was sometime in the 60s.
That's where it bopped into my research. Nadeem Zahawi's business partner, Stephen Shakespeare, interesting name. He was actually called Stephen Kowalski. And Stephen Kowalski, his father after World War II, was part of the press liaison for the British Army in newly Cold War West Berlin. He was German. Well, he was actually Polish, but he was German. And this is where it stems into today's life, if you like. So Stephen Kowalski, who took his wife's surname, Shakespeare, right? So his father was a press liaison officer. That's what they called him. So he'd go over to East Berlin, and the Russian or the East German press liaison officers come to West Berlin, and they basically all spy on each other. So in essence, this guy was a spy. Now, this guy then came to England, Stephen Kowalski, and he went to this private school that seemed to tip out all these intelligence operatives, right? But there's no way a guy who was just a press liaison officer could have funded, after Cold War Germany, where they were eating bread with about 1 million Reichmarks or wherever, could afford to come to this prestigious British private school. And nowhere in his autobiographies has he said how he's got. Anyway, Stephen Shakespeare was also into the Fluxus movement in the 70s. Okay. Yeah. And that's where it led me to this new school. And the new school, or the New School for Social Research. That's what it's called. And that's a bit of a giveaway.
That gives me a bit of the chills when you say that, for social, yeah.
And that's his full title. It's called the NSSR.
So is it a college then, or is it, because that doesn't sound like a college to me? That sounds more like a laboratory. It
was started, I believe, to bring people over from, like, Jewish people over from Germany, and it was sort of called like the Exile University, or the University in Exile, or something like that. And then they changed the name to the New School University, and it's had several different names. But yeah, anyway, it's now the New School for Social Research.
Okay, so that's where Yoko and Toshi met John Cage, this alleged CIA stooge, and this is where their relationship, where Yoko's relationship began with John Cage. And it was quite a fruitful relationship. It was a friendship and it was a working relationship. So from this is when Yoko began to get active as a quote unquote conceptual artist. So the official story goes, so the official narrative is, and this is according to a new biography that came out quite recently, which was, she gave the thumbs up to this biography. It's not an autobiography, but it was written by someone who's interviewed her over many years, and it's based on interviews with her. So according to this narrative, how she got into being a conceptual artist was, she decided with Toshi she found a rundown apartment in downtown New York, right? Cheap rundown apartment, and she decided to rent it out to hold art events, I suppose you could call, very, very small scale, because it was just a room, I think, or an apartment, a very small apartment, and she would host poets and that kind of thing within that avant-garde field, friends that she knew who were artists and poets and so on, and they would come and take part in these shows. And she didn't actually take part in them herself. And one of the very regular visitors to these events was John Cage. He was always there. He was always kind of hanging around, if you like. So this went on for a few months, and then Yoko and Toshi decided to go back to Japan. And then they decided to fund a Japanese tour for John Cage.
Was Cage bisexual?
I think he...
Because he had a wife, and then he's obviously divorced her, and not he's died now, like. And then it says here his partner was Merce Cunningham. Don't know.
Yeah, I think he might have been gay. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But since the previous episode we did, if you remember, I talked about the Darmstadt school. It's called the Darmstadt school, but it wasn't really a school when it started back in when was it? The late 40s, early 50s. I can't remember when it started. It was a place where, and it's still there to this day. It's in Darmstadt in Germany, and it was a place where twice a year avant-garde composers and musicians would meet to share new works that they were working on or that they just completed, to hold seminars, to talk, to discuss, to hold lectures, that kind of thing. And as we mentioned in the previous episode about the Darmstadt school, it was at least initially funded by the US military. That has been found
which again
out
bleeds back into that press liaison type of work that people are doing.
Yeah, it does, and it's always Germany. It's always Germany for some reason. It's always Germany. So I mentioned in that previous episode that there was a guy by the name of Konrad Burmer who used to attend these Darmstadt so-called schools, and he claimed that Theo Adorno, who is actually an avant-garde composer and musician, was an avant-garde composer and musician, used to attend these schools. That's not an allegation. That is true. Yeah. John Cage used to attend. Karl-Heinz Stockhausen used to attend, who was another of the godfathers of the avant-garde. And I said in that previous episode that Konrad Burmer claimed that Theo Adorno and John Cage and Stockhausen were CIA, that they were always hanging around with the CIA. I've got a printout here. I've actually found the interview now. I didn't have it then, and it was from a German interview, and it's been translated into English. So forgive me if some of this does seem a bit wobbly in terms of the grammar and everything. But this is what he said in an interview from 2010. Right, he said, "Religion wasn't God. Our religion was Theodor Adorno. In the late 1950s, the composers Stockhausen, Kegel, and Michael Koenig, B.A. Zimmerman were all involved. Also, the ever-smiling John Cage. Teddy Adorno hopped from one to the other. Invisibly in the background was the CIA." At which point the interviewer then asks him, "Excuse me, did you just say the CIA?" And he replies, "Of course. The Darmstadt Summer Courses for New Music, the Darmstadt School, were an initiative of the American military government. The Congress of Cultural Freedom, a CIA organization, had already held a congress in Rome in 1954 to promote avant-garde music. The composer, Nicholas Nabokov, was the Secretary General of the CCF, Congress of Cultural Freedom, until 1963, and the highly intelligent CIA chief Michael Josselson was a specialist in psychological warfare." And then the interviewer asks him, "And what about Adorno?" And Burma replies, "The Americans had actually allowed themselves to be persuaded by Adorno that emancipated art would lead to an emancipated society, and that a catastrophe like National Socialism could thus be prevented. Adorno was right about many things, but not this." So that's an actual translation of an interview from Burma in 2010. And just to add to that, again, going back to Bertrand Russell, because it is important to remind ourselves that Bertrand Russell was an honorary chairman of the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And T.S. Eliot, who is also related to the Eliots, the Ashers, and that's even according to Jane Asher, who said that in an interview some years back. I think it was in the Independent newspaper. She said as much. T.S. Eliot was in the British Society for Cultural Freedom. So this is who Yoko was hanging around with.
And obviously, I know you just mentioned, but T.S. Eliot, just to bring the Eliot name up, was from the American arm of Jane Asher's mother's family, the Earls of St. German in Cornwall.
And another eugenicist.
And another eugenicist. Yeah,
another supporter.
And another friend of Bertrand Russell. And you could go, and it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, well, he lived in Bertrand Russell's flat in Bloomsbury. which was just down the road from the Indica bookshop, some 40 years later or whatever. But this is where Yoko's breakdown happened. So she hosted this where they, why would they fund this Japanese tour? Surely John Cage was influential enough to do it by himself. But anyway, so Yoko and her then husband Toshi funded and organized this Japanese tour for John Cage, and Yoko actually participated in it. I think I mentioned that before. And when the tour was over and John Cage went back to America, Yoko and Toshi remained in Japan, and then she fell into a deep depression. And this is where it gets a bit cloudy, because this is according to the official biography. This is what happened. She suddenly got depressed, but it doesn't really explain in that biography why she got depressed. And she got locked up in a mental asylum. It just gets weirder. It's really, really bizarre. So this is where a guy by the name of Anthony Cox appears on the scene, right?
Do you know which mental asylum it was, Matt?
No, I don't.
Right.
I don't know. So Anthony Cox became Yoko's second husband. Right. So it's just it. Right. This is the official version, right? And this actually sounds more nonsensical than the quote unquote conspiracy theory that you could put to it. So according to the official version, what happened was, so Anthony Cox, he was kind of he was immersed in the avant-garde scene, right? And he was in America, right? And somehow he got to learn of Yoko Ono's work. I think he read one of her poems or something in a book, or saw one of her art pieces or something like that. And he was so impressed, right? And this is according to the official story. He was so impressed by what he saw that he sought out to find Yoko so that he could meet her. So he found out that she was in Japan. So he went all the way to Japan and managed to find her. He managed to find Yoko's husband.
We're talking early 60s here, aren't we?
Yeah, we're talking early 60s.
Social media.
Yeah. So, and presumably this is a guy without a pot to piss in, right? And somehow he's managed to go all the way to Japan. And in Japan, which isn't exactly a village, he's managed to find Toshi and say to Toshi, "Oh, I'd love to meet Yoko Ono." And Toshi replied, "Well, she's in a mental asylum." So at that point, Anthony, this is according to the official narrative, right? So what Anthony did was he went to the mental asylum, and he claims when he got there, he saw Yoko and she was heavily sedated on Valium. And he was trying to meet her. He got there and he was trying to he saw her in the hospital, heavily medicated, but he couldn't actually get to her. She didn't want to talk to him.
Really? I can't believe why.
How do you just walk into a mental asylum if
exactly?
Even in the 60s, it would have been difficult.
See her in the distance, walking around one of those fucking fields.
And also, why would her husband tell him which mental asylum? We've got this stalker who's come over from Britain or wherever he's come. Yeah.
It just sounds like a fanciful story, that, doesn't it?
It really does, doesn't it? So eventually what happened was she relented and she spoke to him. And he says what he did was, how he got her out of there, he kicked up a stink with the administration.
Must have been that pot he'd been pissing in.
Nice one. Yeah. So yeah, and he said, look, if you don't let her go, I'm going to tell the American media about this, because she's an American artist, and the newspapers are really going to want to know about this, and the name of your
all right, we'll just let her out then.
So that's what they did. But there's another version, right? And this sounds a bit fanciful, but more truthful. Is he got in there somehow pretending to be an American psychiatrist and discharged her, right? He just like that. Okay, so that's the non-official version. But as I say, there's something really it's like understatement. Yeah,
it sounds like handlers handling handlers to me.
Yeah.
So have we got any other background on this Cox geezer then?
Oh yeah, loads. Yeah. So he got her out of there, right? And this again,
stupid question, wasn't it? That stupid question. Just open that door, didn't I?
Oh, good. Yeah. So, again, this is according to the official, well, I say the official biography, officially sanctioned biography on Yoko Ono. So he got her out of there. She was still heavily medicated, apparently. She was off her head, right? And he got they got romantically involved, right? They started seeing each other. Okay, so she's still married to this other guy.
Still drugged up.
Drugged up. She's been broken out or gotten out of this mental asylum where she's been for God knows how long. God knows what they've done to her there. And they get romantically involved. She gets pregnant with his child. She divorces Toshi and she marries Anthony Cox. That's what happens. And then they come back to America. Right. Anthony Cox, very interesting character, very interesting background. He, depending where you look, he's either described as an artist, a filmmaker, a producer, director, all kinds of things. Now, sometime in the 1970s, I think it was in the early 1970s, John and Yoko did Anthony and Yoko did have a child together, and they called her Kyoko.
Right.
And when she split up with
Anthony, was that like an avant-garde name?
Probably. Yeah, thousands of Japanese people watching have just gone click.
Off. Yeah.
Yeah, so they had a kid together, and when she broke up with Anthony towards the end of the 60s and she was with John, there was a custody battle. They won. John and Yoko won the custody battle, but then Anthony ran off with the child, and she never saw that child again for about 20 years or something. Right. So, and what he did was he ran off with her and joined a cult.
Right.
And it was, I haven't talked about this in years, actually, and I've had to get my notes out to remind myself of it. It was a cult, a so-called sect called the Church of the Living Word, which has been described as a mind-controlling Christian cult, and it was headed by a defrocked Christian priest by the name of John Robert Stevens, whose followers believed was Jesus Christ. And it's claimed that he prayed with his followers for the deaths of Jimmy Carter, President of the United States to be Jimmy Carter, also David Rockefeller and Robert F. Kennedy. Now, Anthony eventually got out of there sometime in the late 70s, I think. I'm not sure how long he was in there for. And he's made a film about it. He's actually made a documentary, and it's on YouTube. And if I can find it, I don't know if I've got it written down anywhere. No, I don't think I've got it written down. I thought I'd written it down. I thought I'd written down the title of it. But if
we do find it, we'll put it in here.
Shiloh, headquarters of the Church of the Living Word. Better known as the Walk, this cult prays for people to die. It brainwashes its own members. Its ministers are ordered to have sex with the cult women. Although the Church of the Living Word began in California, it has now spread to the Midwest. It is in Iowa that Shiloh, the cult's indoctrination center, is located. Built by virtual slave labor, the main building is the size of 2 football fields. Shiloh is designed to accommodate 6,000 people when the end of the world comes. The Walk is a violent, secretive, demanding cult. Membership in it can be a devastating experience.
And when I came out in 1977, I was really a basket case. I mean, I could hardly tie my shoelaces. I could hardly get dressed in the morning. I couldn't decide what to wear. I didn't know what to do. And
Tony Cox was a member of the Walk for 5 years. It nearly destroyed him. His story will serve as a warning to others who might be enticed by a cult.
It's really a frightening experience. I mean,
Tony's story begins in art school.
when I got out of art school, I realized in actual fact I had been training for what was to be the next big art form with the advent of Andy Warhol and Alan Capro, the happening artists. And art was moving off the canvas now altogether. And the new direction was art forms that the audience participated in. And this is how I became attracted to Yoko Ono, because she had developed an art form. It wasn't called concept art in those days, but it was an art form that was dealing with the very concept of art itself, or so it appeared. Then Yoko and I got involved, we got married, and we started doing performances together, and I helped her get back on her feet and helped her collect all her works together, and we published a book called Grapefruit.
Tony and Yoko quickly moved to center stage in this new art world. In London, in Trafalgar Square, they orchestrated an art happening featuring 2 of the lions. They rented huge canvas drop cloths and asked passers-by to help them wrap these around the regal British lions. Tony directed a film of the event. Their most successful project was film number 4, a movie consisting of the bare bottoms of 365 famous people. The London movie house where it was screened was packed out. The crowds loved it. The critics were bemused by it. The British Film Board banned it. And Tony and Yoko were famous.
I've always wondered whether John Lennon was mind-controlled. And Anthony Cox, if John Lennon was mind-controlled, then Anthony Cox is a likely candidate to have been involved in that. When John Lennon first began seeing Yoko Ono around 1968, I think they started to see each other. It was made public. John Lennon's former wife, Cynthia, so the story goes that Cynthia had gone on holiday to Greece, I think, and she left John at home. And whilst she was away, Yoko came to the house, the family house, because Cynthia wasn't there. Julian, their child, wasn't there. They were all on holiday, and they sort of got it on, right? And she decided to stay. She didn't leave, so they got it on.
So
Okay.
she became a stalker like that. The Anthony Cox guy, yeah.
Yeah. That's what Cynthia claims, that before Yoko and John hooked up, that Yoko would stand outside the gate of the family house, and write him letters as well, and she would threaten to kill herself if he didn't meet with her, and all kinds of stuff. This is according to Cynthia. And so, when Cynthia went on holiday with their son Julian, with John and Cynthia's son Julian, Yoko came over. I think John invited her over, and they got it on. And she stayed. And Cynthia came home one day, and she walked through the door, and she saw Yoko dressed in her nightgown, walking around the house. And Cynthia just walked out, just turned around and walked out of the house. So fast forward a few weeks or a few months, I don't know what. And this is according to Cynthia. This was in one of her biographies, her own autobiographies, I should say. It was in one of her autobiographies. She said that, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't have the book in front of me, but she and John arranged to have a meeting, right? So she left the house. She left the family house, the mansion, and John and Yoko continued living there. And she went and lived with her mum, I think, with Julian. And they arranged to meet again, right? Because they were going to, I think they were going to talk about the divorce and who's going to look after the child, custody and all of that kind of thing. So they arranged to meet at the old family house where John and Yoko are now living together. So Cynthia turns up, and she said, when she turned up, she saw Yoko. This is meant to be a conversation a conversation about the final moments of a marriage and how to deal with that, and how to negotiate how you're going to do this. And sitting right in the middle of them is Yoko. She doesn't leave the room. She just sits there, all dressed in black, just sitting there motionless, is the way that Cynthia describes it. And the way, again, I'm just going from memory from this book. So Cynthia walks into the room, and Yoko's sitting there on the sofa, all dressed in black. John's sitting next to her, I think, again, all dressed in black. And she said, when she looked at John and spoke to him, he hardly registered that she was there. And she said it was almost as though it wasn't him. It was as though something or somebody had taken him over, and that she wasn't talking to the old John. The old John wasn't there. Something else was there instead of it.
Now, when you look at that in isolation, but then say, I'm not saying it was exactly the same time, but not many years after, or before, sorry, Paul McCartney's living in a house with someone who, from our research, looks like he's been trained by William Sargent. All of a sudden, when you're hearing stories like this, you're actually thinking, how many of these people were mind controlled or controlled from outside?
Yeah. And I think Anthony Cox is in the middle of this somehow. Whether he was the controller, and Yoko was controlled and also a controller, I don't know. But how Anthony Cox fits into this again was, I think it was early 1970, January 1970, maybe just after Christmas. By this point, John and Yoko were married, and Anthony Cox had moved to Amsterdam. I think it was. Right. I think it was Amsterdam, somewhere in that region. And he'd hooked up with a lady called Melinda. They were living together. This was before the custody stuff happened. So at this point, Anthony Cox and Yoko and John were doing okay. So there was no problems at this point in time. So John and Yoko decided to go and see Anthony in Amsterdam to visit and stay there. And to, Melinda was there as well. Now, at the time, and again, I'm going to have to look at my notes because this is, again, it gets really weird here. Now, Cox was friends around this time with a guy called Donald Hamrick. I'm just looking at my notes just to check. Yeah, his name was... He was friends with this guy called Donald Hamrick, who was leader of what was called the Harbingers Commune. And this was in California, and it was formed sometime in the late 60s. And Hamrick has been described as being a quote-unquote scientist UFO evangelist. So he was into the alien agenda, right? So his agenda was basically to push the alien visitation agenda into the mainstream. Now, it's also been claimed that Hamrick was actually secret intelligence, that he was working covertly for the CIA in conjunction with the FBI as well, to the project Operation Chaos, which has links to MK Ultra as well. And for anyone who's not aware of Operation Chaos, this was basically like a COINTELPRO kind of thing. It was there to infiltrate and destabilize anti-Vietnam war protesters and also people who were protesting against the US government at that time, which John Lennon was. He was involved in that scene. Now, when John went to visit Anthony Cox in Amsterdam or Holland, I can't remember where it was exactly, at his farmhouse where he was staying with Melinda, he actually met Donald Hamrick. He actually met him, but Hamrick was there. I don't know if he was staying at the farmhouse or whether he was visiting, but he actually met him. And this is partly according to John Lennon. He's talked about this in one or two interviews. Now, he said that Hamrick said to John, "Look, I know you've been trying to give up smoking. I might be able to do that for you." And John said, how can you do that? He says, "Well, I can hypnotize you. I can hypnotize you into giving up smoking." So John thought, okay, well, might as well give it a try. So the way that John has described this, so I'm assuming this is in Anthony Cox's house that this is going on, right? So he claims that Hamrick tried to hypnotize him, but didn't quite succeed. And John, and I can't remember where I found this, but John has talked about this in an interview. John says that during this attempt by Hamrick to hypnotize him, he started to get a little bit scared when suddenly two people came into the room. One who he described as a quote-unquote magician, who, in John's words again, was there to put spells on everybody. So, okay, now there's this book that came out in the 80s, and it's called The Lives of John Lennon, and it's by Albert Goldman. Very, very controversial book because it doesn't put John Lennon on a pedestal. Now, according to that book by Albert Goldman back in 1988, he claims that Donald Hamrick had this belief that he wanted to make into a reality, and to quote Goldman, that the best way to promote communication between spacemen and earthmen was through the Beatles. So according to Goldman in this book, what Hamrick was trying to do, what Hamrick put it into his head that the Beatles had succeeded in turning on mainstream society to taking LSD, to turning on. They'd succeeded in pushing the meditation agenda through the Maharishi. So Hamrick thought, well, if the Beatles can do that, maybe I can get the Beatles to push the alien agenda, the alien spaceman visitation agenda.
Do you think this could have been to make Lennon look silly as well?
Quite possibly.
I'm not saying that there isn't other beings, but what I mean by that is that at the time, obviously, people would ridicule someone like that, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
If it was to going back to the chaos and COINTELPRO situation.
Yeah, maybe, to cheapen it.
Yeah, maybe they're trying to...
like the Beddins or like whatever. Beddins, like the Beddins and stuff. Well, the thing is, John Lennon says that this Hamrick guy didn't succeed in hypnotizing him. But if you fast forward about 3 or 4 years, I think it was 74, 75, John Lennon, and you can find footage of this, John Lennon stating that he saw a UFO.
Over here, up there, I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a balloon, and it was so near.
And it looked sort of round, white, luminescent, and silent.
Silent, and it looked dark, like black or grey in the middle, and had white lights, just looked like light bulbs, just going off, on, blink, 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 round the bottom, and on top was a red light.
In New York, him and his then girlfriend May Pang saw a UFO, and he wrote about it in songs. He wrote about it in the song "Nobody Told Me," which came out in posthumously in 1984. He sings the words, "There's UFOs over New York, and I ain't too surprised."
Do you know that? What's Hot Chocolate sang about a UFO, and they were on the same label, weren't they?
Yeah, they were on Apple, yeah. So who knows, maybe he went back to Apple Records and talked about... So I'm not sure that this didn't... John Lennon says it failed, that this attempt
But that sounds like the Paul McCartney waking up and saying, have you heard of this song called, Yesterday?
Yeah,
I don't know like it worked, but they told him it made him believe it didn't work.
Yeah. And Goldman, in his book, also claims that Cox's wife, Melinda, was a practicing witch and that she was also a member of the Harbingers.
Right.
And that Hamrick... there's more. And that Hamrick had actually enlisted her to use her powers, to get her supernatural powers, in other words, to get Lennon to...
So was she the magician?
Board. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe she was the magician. Another thing that happened around this time, so this is early 1970. I don't know if this is worth mentioning, but John Lennon, when he was there, I think Melinda shaved all his hair off.
After their marriage, Tony and Melinda decided to move back to London, where Tony hoped to resume his career. But business hassles quickly became overwhelming. They needed a quiet place where they could reflect on where their lives were going and whether God could be found. So they retreated to a secluded farm, which they rented in the north of Denmark.
And we thought nobody knew where we were, but John and Yoko ferreted us out, and they just came up there cold. And they showed up, and literally John showed up with tears in his eyes and said, we treated you really badly in the past, and we really want to repent for that. And I said, okay, well, you can stay with us. So they came and they moved in, and they stayed for a month. And we really let our hair down. In fact, we cut it all off. I had a crew cut when John showed up, a real short crew cut, which I would do from time to time. I used to let my hair grow real long, right down to my shoulders, and then I would just cut it all off, right down to my scalp practically, and then I let it all grow back again over the course of the next year or so. And I just had one of these, real short crew cuts when they showed up. And John said, let's all cut our hair together. So they cut their hair off. And Melinda cut hers off, and Kyoko did too. So the five of us all had real short crew cuts.
It looked as though the quiet month together in Denmark would bring reconciliation between the Coxes and the Lennons.
And they even offered me Alan Klein's job as their manager. And there was a lot of tension over that because I turned that down.
She shaved all his hair off. So he was pushing 30 at this point. Now, isn't there a train of thought that if the mind control program begins to break down at the age of 30, and I'm thinking of Britney Spears here, when she shaved her head, and she was about 30 at the time that she did that. So I'm just thinking maybe he was breaking, the program was breaking down, and they needed to get him over to Amsterdam to see this Hamrick guy to sort of like, change the program, if you like. I don't know. I'm just putting it out there.
I just think that people like Lennon, who I do hold some hope out for. He said to him a lot of things that were a bit like Prince when he was talking about chemtrails. They come over and spray it, and then everyone got violent. He was noticing things that other people weren't noticing or not saying anyway. Lennon was certainly doing that. It was obviously, I mean, we're going to play that video at some point in this presentation. I've mentioned it earlier on, of him on that show where he talks about being run by maniacs. He knew about all this stuff,
Yeah.
But do you know? I'm just looking at some of. I've never looked at it before. Some of Yoko Ono's art, and I'm thinking, I was looking at that so far. Half a room. How is that art?
Oh yeah. It's shite, I actually went to the Tate Gallery. I think it was in I can't remember what year it was. Maybe it was 2023, and it was.
It says 2014 here. The Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao.
Yeah.
Half a basket of flowers, half a high-heeled shoe, half a man's shoe, half a strainer, half a plastic cup. Goes on and on and on and on.
Yeah. She also did one called Cut Piece.
Right.
Which was her sitting on a stage, and people would come up and cut pieces off her dress until she was completely naked. And they would even cut her bra off as well. They would even cut, and she would just stand there with her hands cupped over her breasts.
Yeah.
I'm looking at ones here, and it's she's clearly put a boat in a white room, and everyone's written on it in bold.
Yeah, I've seen that one. Yeah, I went to the Tate.
Was that at the Tate? Was it?
Yeah, that was at the Tate. I think it's actually on tour. I think it's as we speak now. It's somewhere else. I've got to say, it was interesting. What I mean by interesting, it was worth the money because it wasn't just like I'm not really into art exhibitions, really. To be honest, I don't go to a lot of them, but I don't know how long they're meant to last. But this one, you got your money's worth. It was called Music of the Mind. So yes. was it? Yeah, and it was at the Tate.
I've seen that somewhere. Yeah.
And it was a retrospective. So it was her life's work, everything that she'd been doing since the late 50s up until the present. So it was not everything in there was original. They do say that before you go in, I think. They said that before you go in. Not everything in there that you see that is a sculpture or wherever is actually the original of what was there, of what she made in the 60s. A lot of it was, but a lot of it wasn't. It was a recreation. A lot of it was recreations. But it was well worth the money. If you're looking at it from a research point of view, I got my money's worth because I was in there for about nearly 4 hours. Mm. Because it's not just basically her life story, her in art from the 50s to the present day. It wasn't just her art exhibits, but it was excerpts from her music. There was documentary films. You could sit in rooms and actually watch films, her documentary films that she'd made and little art pieces that she'd put on films over the years. So from that point of view, if you're looking from a research point of view, I did get my money's worth. I was in there that boat was in there. And there's also the one called Bottoms as well. There's a film called Bottoms. And this is just avant-garde. I can't remember, but I think it's a film. I don't know how long it goes on for, maybe 30 minutes or 10 minutes or however long it is. And it's just a film of people's bottoms. And then there's another film called Fly, where you see a fly going over a naked woman's body, just walking over her body and stuff. And all and these... And these films are in the.
Why is that interesting? Why is that interesting?
Oh, Dom, you're so stupid.
Sorry.
Yes, that's it. You're not.
You just don't get it, does it? I didn't understand.
Gotcha.
Thankfully,
you Philistine. You utter Philistine.
These white cubes, this Mason's Yard white cube. There's several around London. White cubes.
Oh, right. Okay.
Is that like a yin and a yang to the black cube?
No. There's the white cube at Mason's Yard in central London. There's a white cube at Bermondsey in south east London. There's a white cube in Hong Kong. There's a white cube in Paris. There's a white cube in Seoul. And there's one in New York. Yeah.
A white cube. Okay. I just remembered actually, and I've got the picture of it. I took loads of pictures of that exhibition, and I can send them over to you guys, and you can put them up. There was oh god, I'm going to get in trouble for this if anyone. Oh no one from the world of Yoko is going to be watching this. But then again, you never know. But
did you nick some?
No. There was
you nicked that boat. Walked out with it under his arm.
Where's he doing from
now? There was this I don't know, it was like this great big whiteboard, right? And you were invited to go up to the whiteboard, and I think there was a pen or a pencil hanging on a hook, or there was a pen or a pencil on a table or something. You picked it up and you could do whatever you wanted on the you could doodle
that's the
on
same
it.
with the boat, isn't it? The boat's that. That's
you can do that with the boat. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, now I remember. Yeah,
I'm looking at a picture of it here, man. It's covered in blue writing, so they must have
blue writing. Yeah.
And it starts off white, and then by the end of it, it's covered in.
So it looks like it's the sea and the sky.
To be fair, that actually looks quite interesting.
It does. Some of it's good. Some of the stuff I saw there was good.
Not hard though, is it? To dream. I mean, to think.
But is it good, or is it just because it's there? I mean,
well, it looks nice. Yeah, but the boat looks nice.
I mean, the white cube made its name for pushing people like the young British artists like Tracy Emin.
Well,
the guy, Gavin Turk. Have you heard of him?
No,
never heard of him. I'm just looking at a picture. He's got half a moustache. She's got a big twirling moustache, and he hasn't got anything on the other half.
No, you don't.
Oh, a bit like Yoko then.
Obviously don't
half
get
a chair, half a table, half a that was in the exhibition as well. That half thing, the ladder as well. Where
there's somewhere there's a pile of wood and there's some stones on the floor. I mean, the thing is, if you're given all that money grant wise, and all that nice white space, it wouldn't be hard, would it? Really?
A guy who founded this white cube is called J. Joplin. His dad was Baron Joplin.
Oh, of course. Well, it would be a baron, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
It's not going to be a plumber, is it?
It's a proper, what is it, in the art industry? It's a bloody money laundering operation.
Well, I was going to say, some of it is money laundering,
They choose an artist from the famous college in London.
But you imagine, Chris, right?
Saatchi, buy a few of them, and then they're worth a fortune. Then they've got an exhibition, and that's it.
But you imagine, Chris, right? The ultimate, it's like them badges that you design there on your microphone now. Somebody coming up to you and saying, that green one is worth £100,000. They've just, going back to embezzlement or inventing something, you've just made a badge, stuck it on a microphone and say, that piece of art there is worth £100,000.
But that's what I mean, what it is
they just made it up.
The right person buys Tracy Emin's exhibition, a couple of Saatchi bike up, and then everyone wants them. And then that's it, they're worth a fortune.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's all that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And it's probably the same with Yoko Ono. It'd be very easy, wouldn't it, to push someone to be a famous artist?
Well, at the very least,
a musician or an actor.
At the very least, she wanted to get with Lennon, so her career took off. Right? You could say at the very least she wanted that. But looking at it from a long-term perspective, I think we mentioned this earlier, but she controlled after Lennon died. If you were going to say who benefited from Lennon's death, you'd say it was Yoko Ono. Julian Lennon definitely didn't, and Cynthia didn't.
Yeah.
It looks like it looks like it was set up from there.
Do you know who she reminds me of as well, Chris? Do you know what she looks like? Do you know the Kardashians' mother? She looks like the Japanese version of her.
The other witch.
Yeah. And Ozzy Osbourne's wife.
Well, Ozzy Osbourne's wife was Ozzy Osbourne's father-in-law. Sharon Osbourne's dad was Don Arden, who was known as the what was it called? The Al Capone of pop. He was a British music manager And he,
what does that mean? Yeah.
He used to kneecap you.
he did worse than kneecap. He actually dangled someone out of a building by his ankles. Robert Stigwood, music manager, because he'd heard on the grapevine that Stigwood was trying to poach the Small Faces, who were under the management of Don Arden at the time. So Arden went round there with this guy called Wilf Pine, and they dangled him out of the window. And Wilf Pine was also a friend of the Cray twins, especially and Charlie Cray, one of the brothers. So again, So if you and I think Wilf Pine, when when Deep Purple, when Black Sabbath started, they had their manager wasn't. He was their. I think it was their first manager was okay, but the way that Ozzy has explained it, he was good enough to get them to a certain level, but they needed to make that jump. Do you know what I mean? To get international stardom, and Wilf Pine began managing them. And Wilf Pine is this guy who was associated with the Crays and who'd worked for Don Arden as his henchman. And then Wilf Pine stood down from the job as manager, and then Black Sabbath were managed by Don Arden. So Black Sabbath, essentially for much of their career during the 70s, were being managed by British gangsters, by the underworld, by the British underworld. Yeah, and Mike Jeffries used to work for Don Arden before he went on to manage Jimi Hendrix. And Mike Jeffries was I think he was intelligence. It was like intelligence forces. Right. He was sent up. I think he was drafted into the National Service in Britain, and then he stayed on after his conscription was over. He stayed on, and he was special forces. He was like sent there to assassinate people. Sniper.
People reckon it was him who killed.
Yeah, I think it was Jimi Hendrix's former roadie said that Mike Jeffries killed him. Yeah, for life insurance. Yeah. But yeah, this thing in the exhibition, this board with the pen, you were invited to doodle anything you wanted to. So I just
drew a penis.
I put CIA on the took a picture of it. So yeah.
One of their prints. One of
Yoko
prints.
Chris, yeah.
Sorry, fine. One of the prints on eBay's. I think it's an original, and he just says, "This is not here." It's got pictures of Yoko.
Yeah,
and John
this
Lennon.
is not. Yeah,
£1,638. That is.
What is it? What is
it's
it?
Like a print.
Okay.
Of I think one of her artworks.
Okay.
Imagine Peace, £500.
The thing is, she didn't her art career, and I've only just thought of it now looking at my notes, her art career as a conceptual artist, it didn't really kick off until after she got out of the hospital. So it's after she had that meltdown and the Valium and all of that, and Anthony Cox stepped into the picture, that all of a sudden she's becoming this rising conceptual artist. That's when it started happening for her. I've only just realised now, reviewing my notes as I'm looking at them.
Just looking at her as a whole, do you feel sympathy for her? Do you think she was a victim as well?
I've got sympathy for all of them, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that would be, I don't want to say evil, but I don't want to say...
like a victim, don't you, to me?
I think they're all victims. I think they're all, to one degree or another, victims.
Just in a club that they can't escape, basically.
Yeah, and if they do try and escape, then they get shot. But yeah, it was after she hooked up with Anthony Cox, and he effectively became her manager, and he was getting her out there doing these art shows. They came back to America from Japan. They went to America, and she started to, do all these, these exhibitions and installations, art installations and presentations, where she was the attraction instead of her as before, like I was saying, with her first husband Toshi, they were holding events in that apartment, and she wasn't taking part in those herself. She wasn't the star of them. But now, with Anthony Cox at her side, he became kind of like a manager, a promoter, controller. And that's how she then ended up coming to England and meeting John Lennon. She got an invitation to come. I think it was to take part in a event called the Destruction of Art Symposium, I think it was called. I might be remembering that wrong, but if that's the title of it, that in itself it's like screaming clues at you, isn't it? I mean, if that's what it was called. And it was while she was in London that she met Barry Miles, who was part proprietor of the Indica, and he invited her to go to the Indica bookshop, and that's where she met John Dunbar, and that's how the art exhibition that she held at the Indica Art Gallery happened. So she met Barry Miles at an art event or some kind of event that she was involved in London. He said to her, hey, why don't you come over to the Indica? She went to the Indica, she met John Dunbar, and then she eventually was given this opportunity, if you like, to hold this art exhibition at the Indica Gallery where John Lennon came and met her. Now,
sorry, go on, Matt. Sorry.
I was going to say that Dunbar claims that Tony Cox practically forced Yoko onto John Dunbar. Now, whether that's true or not, but he claims that Anthony Cox...
Music of the Mind, that was it, wasn't it? Yeah, Music
of the Mind. Yeah.
She's holding a hammer in the poster, and that Masonic symbol as well, a hammer, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. And there's another guy by the name of Dan Richter, who's an interesting person in and of itself. He was friends with Yoko at the time, and he was very much... He's American, I think, but he was very much immersed in what was going on in the counterculture scene of London, as opposed to America. I think he moved from the States to London quite early on before the counterculture scene of London went mainstream, of Britain went mainstream. And he got to know, and he knew Yoko from that world, if you like. And he eventually, I think in the early 70s, he actually went to live with John and Yoko, and he became kind of their assistant, their live-in assistant. And he claims that Tony Cox had been pushing Yoko to meet John Lennon, that he was actively involved in getting her to meet John Lennon and to get her to become his patron, if you like, to finance her art projects. Now, the interesting sideline about Dan Richter might be worth mentioning is he was a mime artist. And you know the monkey or the ape, I think it's the ape or gorilla in 2001 Space Odyssey, who throws the bone up. That's him. That's Dan Richter, right. Who later went on to photograph the cover of the Imagine album in 1971. And he lived, as I say, with John and Yoko for a time, and he was their personal assistant. But yeah, he claims that that Cox was pushing Yoko to get in with John Lennon, because he saw John Lennon as this cash cow, if you like. But who's to say that he wasn't pushing her onto? He was pushing Yoko onto John Lennon because he needed her to be there to enter his world and to become, to direct him, if you like.
Yeah.
There's another poster of that, Matt, where she's holding the hammer. It looks like a glass hammer, and the background's a jigsaw, which is fragmented mind, I would say, symbology, wouldn't it?
Yeah. And I've got a couple more, because McCartney does figure in this, and I've got a couple more accounts here of how the meeting took place with John. There's so many different allegations, if you like, and claims as to how it happened, and McCartney does feature in some of this. Now, there's a book by the name of McCartney, and it's by Christopher Sanford, and in that book, and this is an unofficial biography, so I don't know how true this is, or I'll leave it up to you to decide, but in that book, McCartney by Christopher Sanford, it's claimed that Yoko actually met Paul before she ever met John Lennon. Now, according to Sanford's book, she met Paul at the Indica. When she was at the Indica during a visit, she met him there. And she then decided to appear at his doorstep of his house in London, which she'd just bought. So this would have been late. I'm guessing it would have been late 66, late 66. This would have been late 66. Yeah, before she met John Lennon. So October, November time, I'm guessing. At this point in time, Paul had moved out of Wimpole Street pretty much with Jane Asher, and he'd bought a house in St. John's Wood, just about 5-10 minutes walk from EMI Studios at Abbey Road. So in this book by Christopher Sanford, he claims that she turned up at his house one day after she'd met him at the Indica. Now, whether he invited her to come to the house or not, I'm not sure. But for whatever reason, she decided to turn up at his house and knock on the door. And according to this book, the reason that she visited Paul McCartney that day was to ask him if he would fund an art exhibition for her. And in this book by Christopher Sanford, this meeting was according to someone who was there at the time, someone who was a regular visitor to that house. Now, according to this regular visitor who remains unnamed, Paul McCartney did say to Yoko, "No, I'm not interested in funding your art exhibitions or your art projects, but come in." He invited her in. Now, according to this book, Yoko and Paul then proceeded to walk upstairs, and they were gone for quite some time. And then they came walking back down again after quite some time, and Paul had this smile on his face, which I'll leave to your imagination. So Paul would have been going out with Jane Asher at this time. So I'm presuming she wouldn't have been in the house at the time. But yeah, according to this guy who was there, or whoever it was, I don't know if it was a guy, but yeah, that he went upstairs with Yoko, and then she came down again. And there's another claim, and I think and this is actually according to Paul, or whoever you think it is, that yes, Yoko. He did actually meet Yoko before. He did actually meet Yoko before she met John. But according to Paul's version, she turned up at his house and she asked if she could have some manuscripts of Beatles songs. According to Paul, he said, "Well, what do you want manuscripts of Beatles songs for?" And she said, "Well, because I'm putting together this collection of Beatles manuscripts for my friend John Cage. It's his birthday, and I want to give him something, like a present or a birthday gift." And he told her to do one. And he said, "But before you go," he says, "you should go and see my mate John, because he might be interested." So there's two different accounts there. One according to Paul, or whoever it is, and one according to this Christopher Sanford guy, as I say, who claims that Paul invited Yoko in, and they went upstairs for a bit and then came back downstairs again. So this goes against the official narrative, because if you look at old interview footage of John and Yoko, there is this story which you could call the mythology, the John and Yoko officially approved story that John and Yoko didn't, that none of this happened, that John and Yoko met at this art exhibition, and it was just pure chance that they fell in love and all of the rest of it. And none of this stuff with Paul actually happened at all. But yeah, thinking of this, I wonder, if you consider the fact that Yoko Ono, when she moved to America, if you remember, I said when she moved to America from Japan initially, she moved to Scarsdale, this region in New York. Of all the places that she would go to move to, of all the places in America from Japan she went to live, and it was Scarsdale, which just so happened to be where Linda McCartney was, or as she was called then, Linda Eastman, was born, and where she grew up. What a coincidence. Mm. And then they just both happened to go to that same school. Again, of what are the chances? So I'm just wondering if it's true that Paul, or whoever it is, did actually meet Yoko and did get it on with her before she then went on and met John at the art exhibition. Is it quite possible that maybe the narrative wasn't yet preordained? Maybe it was maybe it could have been John and Linda, and Paul and Yoko.
Yeah, maybe.
Don't know.
Maybe they were just testing out who they had any chemicals.
One of the strange things. Can you remember this? Remember this, Chris?
Wife training school.
Yeah, Beatles' wife training school. Yeah.
All right, shall I just throw another one in? Another of those weird so-called coincidences. Linda Eastman, that's not her actual surname. She's of Jewish descent, and when her parents first came over to America, they were called Epstein.
Oh,
double whammy. Yeah.
What are the chances that she would be called she would have the same surname as the Beatles manager? But yeah, anyway.
I'm the other guy.
But what? Yeah,
yeah, and the other guy. Yeah, and the other guy. Yeah.
And what's his name? Can you remember that story of Wimpole Street as well, Chris? Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning. She was a poet. They were both poets in the Victorian era. Lived on Wimpole Street, and John and Yoko said that's what their relationship was like.
I vaguely remember.
Yeah.
Yeah. I vaguely remember you mentioning that a long time ago. Yeah,
they spoke about being, based on a poem. I think I'm sure Yoko did a poem or something like that based on one of them. I'm gonna have to look at that now. It was number 43. That's it. And Yoko wrote a poem. Something happened anyway. It was a poem. I think it was called number 43 or something like that. The poem. It started off here we go. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I don't in popular culture. Let me see if
is that it?
No, it wasn't. It was not spectacular. That's it. So Yoko in 1980, a song from Milk and Honey called "Let Me Count the Ways." Right?
Yeah.
That's her rendition to them two on Wimpole Street that just happened to be where Paul McCartney lived at 57 Wimpole. Yeah, anyway, they lived just down the road, did the Brownings.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm remembering now. Milk and Honey.
That's the
same album.
Yeah, that's the same album where the song "Nobody Told Me" comes from, with the UFO reference as well.
Okay.
So it's I mean, I think it's important to point, just to underline that the Indica, how important the Indica was. So this is a shop, book gallery, bookstore that promoted the avant-garde. So this was a central hub where those who were part of the counterculture scene, the so-called counterculture scene of London, either before it went mainstream and during its years when it was mainstream, this is where they would meet. This is where they would mobilize, if you like, where they would meet to talk about what they were going to do next. This was where the movers and the shakers of that scene would meet and discuss and to plan. And this was the art. So you had the art gallery where Yoko was introduced to John, very instrumental place in their relationship beginning and what happened after that. And the bookshop, so you had the art gallery that was promoting the avant-garde, and then you had the bookshop, which not only sold books on the avant-garde, but it also sold books on the occult. There were books about Aleister Crowley and authored by Aleister Crowley and Kenneth Anger and so on. It sold avant-garde music, so you could go there and buy records, by John Cage and Karl-Heinz Stockhausen and the like, and beat poetry. So this was a very, very important hub, not only as a shop and as an exhibition, but it was actually the meeting point of the UK counterculture. So here we have an interest, a business, whatever you want to call it, the Indica, which is the central hub of the avant-garde of London, so in other words of Britain, and as I think I mentioned before, I believe from the research that I've put in since 2016 into the UK counterculture of England, of Britain, that without the avant-garde is the foundation stone of the UK counterculture scene. Without it, it wouldn't have existed, or it wouldn't have either it wouldn't have existed, or it wouldn't have become as strong and as popular and as mainstream as it did. So you've got this indica, which is pushing the avant-garde, which we know was being pushed by the Congress for Cultural Freedom, of which Bertrand Russell was an honorary chairman of, and that T.S. Eliot was a member of. He was a member of the British offshoot of it. So we got Bertrand Russell pushing the avant-garde through his support of the Congress for Cultural Freedom, and the indica, which is partly run by one of his nephews, one of his distant nephews, if I'm not mistaken, one of his bloodline relatives, Peter Asher. And this is the very place where John Lennon was introduced to Yoko Ono, and which set them off on this journey that they went on. And so it's a very, and it all happened, in this area of London known as Bloomsbury, which, as we mentioned before, is essentially owned by the Duke of Bedford, which is the Russell bloodline, who root back to the town of Tavistock in Devon.
One interesting part to this Indica gallery, it said here, on seeing it, Lennon initially liked the artwork Apple and was impressed by the interactive ceiling painting. So she actually did, this was in 1966, wasn't it? Yeah, 1966.
Yeah.
So she did a conceptual a piece of artwork called Apple.
Okay.
The work consisted of an apple on top of a plexiglass stand.
Oh, right. Yeah.
With a brass plaque bearing the word Apple in capital letters. It's fixed to the front of the stand. The piece was subsequently covered in bronze as part of Ono's Bronze Age series of artworks.
Because McCartney says that, or whoever it is, says that the company Apple, that it was based on a painting by Magritte.
Right.
But I've never bought that. I've never been 100%. It could have something to do with this.
Yeah.
John Dunbar, something I learned quite recently, John Dunbar claims that the concept of the apple for what was to become the Beatles company came to Paul McCartney when he was during an acid trip that he and John Dunbar were having in his flat. So who to believe?
So the apple she used was apparently a Granny Smith. Cool.
Okay.
To be the apple itself was believed to be that of a Granny Smith cultivar. Now, I've never heard of a cultivar. I think it's when it's cut in half. But
okay.
But a cultivar is saying here it's like a flower. But anyway, anyway.
And I'd also add here, because I think we're going to move on to this in a future episode, and I know we talked about this, Dom, or maybe shared a text or a message or whatever. Whatever.
1,000 emails.
Yeah, 1,000 emails. I think we've come to, I don't know if it's the conclusion, but it's with, I think that John Lennon was, and we're going to find out in a future episode or episodes, that John Lennon's got blue blood.
Yes.
He's got royal ancestral line, or should I say royal ancestral lines.
Yeah.
So I think John Lennon was perhaps a blue blood who was born into this matrix, if you like, in order to go forth on this mission with the Beatles.
Yeah.
And he broke a mind controlled blue blood who was brought in to take part in this matrix program.
Broke ranks.
And he broke ranks. Yeah. I think that's possibly what the scenario was.
When we do these genealogies, everyone automatically thinks that they're all bad people. I'm not of, I don't know, you're not. We're not of that mindset, us three.
No.
We're of the mindset that these people have been chosen. They aren't the lucky ones. We might think they are, but they're definitely not the lucky ones.
There's definitely some victims in.
A lot of victims.
I mean, how many people out of this do you think are victims? Do you think they're all victims, or do you think, because it's just such an interconnecting web, isn't it?
Well, what I would say, it depends who your class as I mean, even I remember there's a guy called Larry Summers who worked for the World Bank and Bilderberger and World Economic Forum, and he was the guy that told Mark Zuckerberg to start Facebook up. He's obviously some kind of CIA operative. He was basically saying there are those who think they're making changes in government, and there are those who know they're making changes in government. So what he was saying, even people of who we would class as, or people who class as elite, think they're elite, but they're not. So under them, you've got musicians. They're not even in the upper tier of elites, if you like. They're just still state operatives or assets or whatever you want to call it that are doing the job as cultural Manchurian candidates for
wandering around shitting themselves.
Exactly.
Yes.
I always think, Matt. I've mentioned on our podcast, when you think in 1984, and when you read it, you think that we're Winstons, don't you? But they're the Winstons, aren't they? Because they're still working for the party. They're part of the party. We're not. We're the proles. But Winston shitting himself, isn't it? All the way through 1984.
And I would say that obviously Orwell wrote that book with insight into what actually happened, obviously. Yeah. And he's basically telling you that a lot of these pop stars, film stars, MPs, whoever it might be, at some point get to know what they're really working for, or a president or whatever, and realise they're not in control and they're not as big a shot as they think they are. And maybe Lennon had enough of that. And we've seen it with a few of them, haven't we? I mean, Mark's done bloody hundreds of presentations on different ones. What's he call it? Death by bathtub. You know,
but it seems to me with Lennon, it happened quite early on that he switched.
Yeah,
and they had to do.
Some are going to be more intelligent, aren't they? Or more brave, or whatever you want to call it, or quicker learning. Because whether a lot of these people are highly intelligent people. They're not stupid people, you know. You look at Ringo and you think, he's a bit daft, possibly, or maybe it's an act.
Maybe it's an act.
Look at John Lennon. Maybe he was stupid for not keeping his mouth shut. But anyway. All right then, everybody. Until next time. I think the next one might be John Lennon's Bloodline.
Yeah.
There's so much to unravel in that. Even when we were doing those with Mike Williams, and we did the Ashes and then did the Bloodlines of the Doors, and then we've done this. I was thinking, really it should be called the Bloodlines of the 60s. Because it encompasses all those people from different walks of life, from artists to, everybody, who the controllers used to. I mean, I've done Sharon Tate's Bloodline. I've done Charles Manson's Bloodline. I've done the Beach Boys Bloodline. All three of them are intrinsic. Just them three people. David Crosby's Bloodline, Jim Morrison's Blood. All of them people were in Dave McGowan's book, right?
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to Dave, all of them people are related somewhere. And that's just 4 or 5 of them that I've mentioned. There's absolutely loads of them that were not just part of that whole epicenter, but their cousins, share great-grandparents and what have you.
And again, it just begs the question, why don't they say that? Why don't they tell us that?
Yeah.
Why would you not tell people that?
And people, and we're talking about something slightly different here, but it was nice to end on it. People do email in. I don't know if you get that, Matt. Dom, can you show me how you do your research? I mean, you literally have to set up a research university to show people how to do that and spend hours. It isn't quite as easy as saying, because the subjects seem to pick you.
Yeah.
I know it sounds a bit way out that, but once you're in that vein of, it's like being a creative, if you like, an artifarty. If they come to you. I mean, I didn't think I'd be doing Sharon Tate's Bloodline, for instance.
I didn't think I'd be doing Bloodlines. Never mind.
Exactly, but it is intertwined in everything else that you've done. And Yeah, it's.
Don't get me wrong. I've done Bloodlines in the past.
Yeah, I know you have. Yeah,
but
yeah.
Only as maybe as part of one article. Finished that article and then moved on, and then that's it. Just turned away from it.
Yeah.
But this is like, what we're doing now. I never thought I was going to be doing this.
No,
you know.
So yeah. Anyway, all right, everybody. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in.